Every evening at the Wagah border crossing between Pakistan and India, one of the most absurd military rituals on the planet unfolds. Soldiers in rooster-like headdresses kick their legs above their heads, stomp theatrically, scream, and slam gates in each other's faces. The grandstands roar, tourists film on their phones. It looks like comedy, but on both sides of those gates, hundreds of nuclear warheads are aimed at each other. And the border itself, the line that forced 15 million people from their homes and killed more than 1 million, was drawn in 5 weeks by a lawyer from London who had never set foot on Indian soil in his life. Here, beneath the scorched earth of Punjab, lie the bricks of cities older than ancient Rome and the pyramids. In 1910, British engineers used those bricks to build a railroad, never suspecting they were running trains over the bones of humanity's first great civilization. On this land, the Rig Veda was written. Here, the Buddha first received the face of a Greek god. And here, today, hundreds of nuclear warheads are aimed at each other, ready to turn the entire subcontinent into radioactive ash. This is a land where borders have always been carved through living flesh, first by the relentless grinding of tectonic plates, and then by the hasty pencil of a terrified British lawyer. Why did the territory that became the cradle of Eastern wisdom and the most profound philosophy turn into the most dangerous powder keg on Earth? How did a people who built the most sophisticated system of urban drainage and flawless sewage 4,000 years ago end up facing the threat of total extinction? Why do artificial lines, sketched onto a map in just 5 weeks by a man who had never been to India, still make tens of millions of people hate each other to this day? The story of Pakistan is not simply a chronicle of endless wars and religious fanaticism. It is the story of one massive, unhealing scar. And to understand where it came from, we need to start with the land itself. The territory of modern Pakistan is wedged between the Himalayas to the north and the Arabian Sea to the south. Heavy monsoon clouds rolling in from the ocean slam into the mountain wall and unleash torrential rains that feed the great rivers. But this same geography makes the region fatally unstable. The ground shakes, rivers shift course, and the legendary Sarasvati, in one historical instant, simply vanished underground, leaving behind nothing but myths and dead cities. Extraordinary natural abundance here has always gone hand in hand with total catastrophe. Agriculture became the foundation for accumulating surpluses, which allowed societies to grow more complex. Major river valleys were in themselves fertile ground for the rise of civilizations, and the first great cultures emerged around the largest rivers almost simultaneously, around 3000 BC, the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Yangtze and Yellow River, and finally the Indus. The civilization that grew in the Indus Valley is called exactly that, the Indus Valley Civilization. Its script remains undeciphered to this day, and we have no idea what they call themselves. By 2600 BC, the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro had risen in the Indus Valley. This was the Manhattan of the Bronze Age. While the ancestors of Europeans were still wrapping themselves in animal hides, people here were building megacities on strict geometric grids. Wide avenues intersected at right angles. Houses rose 2 stories high, and every courtyard was connected to a centralized sewage system. Mohenjo-daro had no colossal palaces of tyrants or ziggurats designed to crush the will of commoners. The center of the city was the Great Bath, a massive pool lined with waterproof bitumen built for ritual cleansing. The idea of physical and spiritual purity became the foundation of their existence. They traded ivory and carnelian with distant Mesopotamia, and their seals have been found as far away as the coast of Somalia. But this technological greatness concealed the seeds of its own destruction. Building such enormous cities required millions of fired bricks. To keep the kilns burning, the inhabitants began clear-cutting the forests of the Indus Valley on an industrial scale. They committed the first documented ecological catastrophe caused by human hands. The deforested, scorched earth could no longer hold moisture, and savage monsoon floods began methodically washing away block after block. Tectonics finished the job. Earthquakes altered the course of the Indus. People abandoned their perfect homes, migrating east in droves toward the Ganges. They carried with them only meditation poses carved into clay tablets, and the memory of ritual purity, a memory that would outlive their cities by thousands of years. The great cities crumbled to dust, and from the steppes of Central Asia, a new wave of migration was already advancing, bringing with it not only chariots, but an idea that would ultimately split this world in two. Contrary to the colonial fairy tales of the 19th century, invented by the British to justify their rule, the Aryans were not bloodthirsty conquerors who stormed into India and slaughtered the native population. It was a long, centuries-spanning migration of tribes. According to the majority of scholars, they came from the shores of the Urals, crossing the harsh Iranian plateau, carrying with them the Sanskrit language and a cult of fire worship. It was here, on the banks of the Indus, that the newcomers blended with the descendants of the Indus Valley Civilization. From this complex melting pot, the first hymns of the Rig Veda were born. In those hymns, the Aryans glorified the sacred river Sarasvati, the very river that had already begun to disappear by the time they arrived. They were composing hymns to a ghost. The river was vanishing underground before their very eyes, and the memory of it became one of humanity's first great myths. The most ancient sacred text of Hinduism, the foundation of faith for 1 billion modern Indians, was created on territory that today forms the heart of Islamic Pakistan. This is yet another deep scar in the region's history. The spiritual homeland of India lies in a place where India now sees its deadliest enemy. The Aryans brought with them a rigid system of varnas, attempting to separate the noble from the locals, erecting social walls that proved far stronger than the brick walls of Mohenjo-daro. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great marched to the muddy waters of the Hydaspes River. Having crushed Persia, he was absolutely certain that India was the edge of the world. But here, his army encountered war elephants for the first time, living tanks of the ancient world that trampled shields and shattered spears. The Macedonians won, but their exhausted soldiers, upon reaching the Bays River, mutinied and flatly refused to take even one more step eastward. The territory of modern Pakistan became the place where the great western expansion choked and turned back. Remnants of the army stayed behind, blending with the local population and producing one of the most astonishing phenomena in history, Greco-Buddhism. Until that point, the Buddha had never been depicted in human form, only as symbols like the lotus or the wheel. But the Greeks didn't know how to pray to emptiness. They needed statues. And so the Buddha received for the first time the face of a young Apollo, an athletic torso, and the folds of a Greek toga. This synthesis of West and East was picked up by the Kushan nomads who conquered these lands. They didn't destroy the culture, they adopted it, donning silks and minting coins stamped with Greek, Indian, and Persian gods. But the Kushan Empire collapsed the same way every empire on this land has, under pressure from without and within. By the 6th century, the Buddhist monasteries were emptying out, and the land was once again waiting for a new force. That force came from the scorching sands of Arabia. In 711 AD, a 17-year-old Arab commander named Muhammad bin Qasim marched into the region of Sind. The invasion of the Caliphate's armies permanently altered the genetic and cultural code of the region. Islam brought with it the radical idea of absolute equality of all people before God, a direct, lethal challenge to the caste system of Hinduism. The lower castes, who had existed for centuries with the status of untouchable animals, began converting to the new faith by entire cities and provinces. Islam took root here not only through the sword blows of Turkic conquerors, but also through the quiet sermons of Sufi mystics. Sufis wandered the roads of Punjab, building their sanctuaries side by side with Hindu ashrams, and offering a path of ecstatic love instead of rigid ritual. Their shrines, called dargahs, became places where Hindu and Muslim prayed under the same roof. Pakistan became the gateway through which Islam flooded the Indian subcontinent. In the 16th century, the descendants of Tamerlane, the Mughal emperors, united the fractured principalities with an iron fist. Babur brought into India a handful of loyal warriors and an unprecedented technological marvel, gunpowder cannons. At the Battle of Panipat, the thunder of artillery drove the enemy's war elephants mad. In their panic, the animals turned around and trampled their own army. Innovation, once again, shattered traditions that had stood for millennia. The Mughals built an empire of staggering luxury on this land. Under Akbar the Great, a genius who, according to legend, could not read yet amassed a library of 30,000 volumes, India experienced its golden age. Akbar, a Muslim himself, abolished the humiliating tax on non-believers, married Hindu princesses, and even attempted to create a new religion by fusing Islam, Zoroastrianism, and Christianity. It seemed as though the religious scars had finally healed. But fate took another sharp turn. Akbar's grandson, Aurangzeb, became the perfect destroyer. After seizing power, he cold-bloodedly killed his brothers and placed his own father under house arrest. Aurangzeb was a teetotaler, a fanatical ascetic, and a Puritan. He resolved to purge the empire of every heresy by force. By reinstating taxes on Hindus and demolishing ancient temples, he provoked a total uprising by the Marathas. Aurangzeb personally led a 26-year guerrilla war in the south that burned through every resource the state had. Aurangzeb left behind a territory completely drained by internal conflict, with an empty treasury and peoples who despised each other, the perfect prey for men in powdered wigs who were already launching their heavy frigates to inflict the most devastating scar in this land's history. The British East India Company entered India modestly, as a trading corporation leasing ports to buy spices, and left as a ruthless imperial predator that drained trillions of dollars from the subcontinent. The British were virtuosos in the art of reopening old wounds. They wielded the principle of divide and rule with surgical precision, methodically pitting the Muslim elite against the Hindu majority, financing one side or the other depending on political advantage. And they quite literally built their empire from the ruins of others. Those same bricks of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, 4,000 years old, were used as ballast for railroad beds. The trains of the British Raj rolled over the bones of the first great civilization, and the engineers didn't even realize what they were laying beneath the rails. By the mid-20th century, after 2 world wars, the independence movement had become unstoppable. The British Crown could no longer hold on to the colony. But by that point, the scar of mistrust between Muslims and Hindus had grown so deep that coexistence in a single state seemed unthinkable. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a brilliant lawyer and leader of the Muslim League, put forward the two-nation theory. He demanded the creation of an independent Muslim state. Notably, Jinnah had not always been a separatist. In his youth, he was friends with Gandhi and Nehru and believed in the possibility of a united India. But the forces that had been set in motion by then, decades of mutual distrust, religious massacres, British manipulation, had left those ideals far behind. A peaceful divorce was no longer possible. The new state was given the name Pakistan, and the name itself is unusual. It was coined in 1933 by a student named Chaudhry Rahmat Ali as an acronym from the names of the Muslim regions of northwestern India: Punjab, Afghania, Kashmir, Sindh, and the ending from Baluchistan. At the same time, Pak in Persian and Urdu means pure, giving the name a second meaning: land of the pure. This is a rare case in history where a political acronym became the official name of an entire nation, unlike abbreviations like the USSR or USA, which remain just that, abbreviations. The acronym Pakistan transformed into the country's actual name. The suffix stan, Persian for land, gives it a ring of antiquity, even though the word itself is less than 100 years old. The British wanted to leave as quickly as possible, shedding all responsibility for the coming chaos. And here came the most monstrous episode in the anatomy of the scar. In the summer of 1947, a lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe was urgently summoned from London. He'd never set foot on Indian soil, knew nothing of the local geography, did not understand the complex hydrology of the rivers, and had no grasp of the cultural intricacies. He was given exactly 5 weeks to cut a giant subcontinent in half. Radcliffe, sitting in a stuffy office, drew borders on outdated maps. His pencil traced lines straight through villages, slicing through ancient marketplaces, and even running through residential homes, leaving the kitchen in India and the bedroom in Pakistan. He hacked Punjab and Bengal in two, right through living tissue. When the flags of the new sovereign states were raised on August 14th and 15th, 1947, to the sound of national anthems, the world shuddered in horror. What followed was a mass migration of peoples without parallel in modern history. 15 million people abandoned their homes, their land, and their businesses, surging toward each other across the border. Trains that left Lahore packed with living people arrived at Indian stations filled with hacked-apart corpses. In retaliation, entire trains heading to Pakistan were slaughtered. More than 1 million people perished in this uncontrolled carnage, by the knife, by starvation, and by epidemic. This was not a partition of a state, it was a butcher's amputation without anesthesia. Radcliffe, realizing the scale of what he had done, burned all of his working drafts, refused his knighthood fee, and left the subcontinent forever. He later admitted that he had simply been trying to save his own life from the fury of millions. The scar he had drawn would pulse forever. Its most painful point became the beautiful mountainous region of Kashmir. The local Maharaja, a Hindu by faith, ruled a territory where 77% of the population was Muslim. He attempted to declare independence, playing at neutrality. But a popular uprising that erupted instantly and a covert invasion by Pakistani armed groups backed him into a corner. In a panic, he turned to India for military help. Delhi agreed to send troops on one condition only: the full legal accession of Kashmir. The Maharaja signed the document and Indian paratroopers landed in Srinagar. Thus began the first bloody Indo-Pakistani war. Kashmir became a wound that never heals, a proving ground for terrorists and regular armies alike. But the most terrifying test awaiting Pakistan lay within its own artificially stitched borders, where a conflict was brewing that could tear the nation to pieces. Pakistan was born in agony, and from the very first day of its existence, it faced a geopolitical absurdity of the highest order. Its territory was artificially split into two isolated halves, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, separated by thousands of miles of hostile Indian territory. In Islamabad, they spoke Urdu, in Dhaka, Bengali. This chimeric structure could not last long. In 1971, the internal scar ruptured with a deafening crack. East Pakistan, exhausted by economic exploitation and the cultural dictates of the Western elite, rose up in revolt. In response, the Pakistani army launched the ruthless Operation Searchlight, aimed at eliminating Bengali intellectuals, students, and political leaders. The punitive campaign quickly escalated into a full-scale genocide. According to independent estimates, hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed. But the most horrifying and systematic instrument of terror was a military-orchestrated campaign of mass rape against Bengali women, cynically described as an attempt to change their bloodlines. Tens of millions of refugees flooded across the border into India. Indira Gandhi seized the moment and sent troops into East Pakistan. The Indian Army crushed Pakistani forces in just 2 weeks. A new independent state appeared on the world map, Bangladesh. The defeat of 1971 was a devastating psychological catastrophe for Pakistan. Overnight, they lost half their territory and came face to face with their absolute vulnerability against India's superior military machine. The fear of total annihilation became the national idea. In 1974, India conducted a successful test of its first nuclear bomb, poetically named Smiling Buddha. Islamabad's response was immediate. Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto uttered the phrase that became the nation's motto: "We will eat grass, we will go hungry, but we will build our own atomic bomb." What followed was the greatest espionage race in history. Pakistani physicist Abdul Qadir Khan stole centrifuge blueprints from European laboratories and, despite global sanctions, built Pakistan's nuclear program from the ground up. In 1998, the world was shaken by a series of underground blasts in the Chagai Hills. Pakistan officially became the first Islamic nuclear power, but Khan's story did not end there. It later emerged that he had been selling nuclear technology to Iran, Libya, and North Korea. The largest illegal nuclear proliferation network in history. The monster that Pakistan had raised for its own protection had taken on a life of its own. Today, the Pakistani military is far more than just a defense institution. It is a massive, all-pervasive business corporation. While maintaining a modest official defense budget, the military controls entities like the Fauji Foundation, which owns major banks, cement and fertilizer factories, bakeries, transportation companies, and prime real estate. The army in Pakistan removes and appoints prime ministers, suppresses the opposition, and guarantees the survival of the state, yet is itself held hostage by the monster it once created. in the 1980s, with billions of dollars from the CIA, Pakistani intelligence agencies generously funded and armed Islamic radicals through a network of madrasas to fight Soviet forces in Afghanistan. Today, those same radicalized groups blow up Pakistani soldiers at checkpoints, assassinate Chinese engineers, and bomb Sufi shrines, those very dargahs where, for centuries, Hindu and Muslim prayed side by side. They demand the creation of a caliphate, threatening to bring down the country from within. But while the generals in Islamabad and New Delhi tensely measure the strength of their nuclear arsenals over control of Kashmir's valleys, the real, relentless enemy is closing in from behind. And that enemy is nature itself. Pakistan ranks among the top 5 countries most vulnerable to the global climate crisis. The great glaciers of the Karakoram mountain range, which feed the waters of the Indus, are melting at an alarming rate. In 2022, abnormal monsoons triggered a biblical flood. A third of the country's territory was submerged. Thousands of villages were wiped off the map, and millions of people lost their homes. The very rivers whose waters Pakistan and India divide by treaty, and over which they are willing to start a nuclear war, are rapidly turning into either uncontrollable, all-destroying mudslides or dried-out, cracked-up ditches. There simply won't be any water left. We began our journey with the daily ceremony at the Wagah border crossing. The silly rooster headdresses, the aggressively high-kicking legs, the theatrical screams and applause of onlookers. But if, for one brief moment, you could silence the deafening roar of the grandstands, you would hear a quiet, ominous, cracking sound. That is the glaciers breaking apart in the mountains of the Karakoram. That is the earth pulsing along the fault lines of Eurasia. States come and go. Great empires crumble to dust, leaving behind nothing but shards of pottery in museum display cases. But the land remains, and it never forgives those who ignore its laws for the sake of temporary lines on a political map. Pakistan is not just another developing country in the news ticker. It is a frightening mirror of our shared tomorrow, where ecology, radical religion, and nuclear physics have twisted into a single deadly knot. And whether that knot can be untied will determine not only the fate of distant Islamabad, but what this land will teach the rest of us. If Pakistan is the story of a land that never forgives, then Iran is the story of a land that reprograms everyone who tries to conquer it. Watch our next video